I wanted to come to you guys, bring you a video that was done by the STB board, or STB committee, the Surface Transportation Board, where the CEO Remember, if you like this video, I would appreciate you subscribing to our channel. Where the CEO of the Pilot Flying J company actually testified to the STB and gave some critical information you guys need to be aware of. It's all talking about obviously the Diesel and D.E.F shortages, and you can see why they're actually having problems with it. And I wanted to bring that video to you.
Schedule. We learned so much yesterday that I'm hopeful our education up here can proceed faster, but we certainly want to hear from everybody. We do not want to cut anybody off. So we're going to have a full hearing. So we will begin with our...
You're now live.
All right, perfect timing. We will begin with our first panel. I think everybody is here, but let me just call the roll to make sure everybody is up here. Pilot travel. Yes. I better put. Shamik Konar. Knit League, Ross Corthell.
Yes, sir.
American Forest and Paper, Julie Landry. Packaging Corporation, PCA.
Good morning.
Good morning, Doug. National Association of Chemical Distributors, Jennifer, Jackie, and Occidental, Carrie-Ann Segman. International Liquid Terminals, Catherine Clay. No? Well, you know what? It may be her plane's late or Metro's on fire or something. Well, she'll get here later. And if so, we'll call her up here. I know that Mr. Konar has got to get in and out, right? So we're going to ask him to testify. If we have some questions, we'll ask him, and then we're going to send him on his way. Fair enough. And then we'll have the full panel. So with that, Mr. Konar, the microphone's yours.
Chairman Oberman, members of the Surface Transportation Board, thank you for inviting me to testify today. My name is Shamik Konar. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Pilot Flying J. We operate the largest network of travel centers in the United States, serving the U.S. trucking industry and four-wheel customers. We currently account for approximately 20% of the country's highway, or as we call it, over-the-road diesel supply, 20%. As well as 30% of the diesel exhaust fluid supply, also known as DEF. Similar to my colleagues here, Pilot is facing a threat of severe reduction in rail service allocations. For Pilot, the service reduction allocations are being imposed by the Union Pacific Railroad. On April 13th, we were informed by the Union Pacific that we were required to reduce shipments by 26%. In subsequent conversations, we were asked to reduce them even further by 50% or face embargoes. We're not aware of any other company being instructed by the Union Pacific or any other railroad to reduce their shipments to the extent they're asking Pilot. We understand through conversations with the Union Pacific that its allocations are based on a simplistic approach of looking at those shippers who have increased their number of shipments between January 2022 and March 2022. This does not take into account the overall number of shipments received at Pilot's facilities, which, by the way, have remained static over this period. We believe the Union Pacific's approach does not fairly and proportionately allocate the supply issues, because Pilot has not increased the total number of cars it's received every month since January. What's actually happened is Pilot has become a shipper on for some cars that we were not shippers before. So our facilities are still receiving the same number of cars It's just the name of who's shipping has changed because we've taken control over some of the cars because of the issues we've had with the railroads, so that we have the optionality to deliver these cars in markets that they can take, right? So the total number of cars has stayed the same. We understand and appreciate that the current market conditions are imposing significant constraints on the railroads, and we're committed to help ease this congestion. However, 26 to 50% reduction in our allocations will have substantial consequences for the markets. I would like to take this opportunity to take you through a few of the consequences that Union Pacific's mandate will have on the supply chain, the availability of fuel, and fuel prices. First, let me talk about the DEF supply chain. And just as a reminder, we supply about 30% of the DEF in the United States. The trucking sector is dependent on DEF. All trucks manufactured after 2010 cannot operate without DEF. And Pilot operates, if not the largest, one of the largest DEF supply networks in the country. We have 23 rail-served DEF facilities that make the DEF, and we have 18 rail transloaders. Of the 300 plus million gallons of DEF that Pilot supplies to the industry every year, 74% is moved via rail. Union Pacific's restrictions will prevent Pilot from keeping many markets adequately supplied with DEF, likely causing shortages that will sideline trucks and reduce trucking capacity. Let me give you some context. A single rail car carries 21,500 gallons of DEF on average, okay? A single truck generally takes in 7 gallons of DEF every time they fill. This is based on our data. So that implies that a single rail car is basically providing 3,000 trucks worth of DEF fills. For some more context, basically every rail car that gets missed in terms of DEF delivery will reduce trucking potential by 5 million miles. All right? That's a really big number, 5 million miles, because you've got 3,000 fills and DEF blends with diesel at a ratio of 2.7% for 100 gallons. All right. So 2.7 gallons of DEF allow a truck to drive 100, to use 100 gallons. Furthermore, a reduction in freight transported by the UP will only add additional pressure on the trucking sector in general. The railways are pulling back. We got to move the stuff on trucks. If we can't supply DEF, there's more pressure on the sector and we let the sector down. Second, fuel availability and pricing. Let me begin with diesel. US diesel inventories today are running 10 to 15% below what they have been in the last 5 years at their lowest point. So if you take the minimum diesel inventory over the last 5 years, today we're 10 to 15% below that number. Certain markets like the Northeast, the West, and the Southwest are even in a worse shape than the rest of the country. Renewable fuels like biodiesel, renewable diesel move exclusively on rail, on ships, or on trucks, and there are no pipeline alternatives. Certain states like California are heavily dependent on the imports of renewable fuels that are generally transported on rail. Fourth, over 50% of Pilot's renewable diesel is transported on rail, and having our capacity cut by 50% would actually increase fuel prices in these states and potentially run out some of these locations. Let me now address the challenge with gasoline. In order for gasoline to meet the octane requirements required by engines, 87 to 93 octane, you have to blend gasoline with ethanol to get to that level of octane so that you could use it in a car. Ethanol, like bio and renewable diesel, basically moves on trucks, ships, or rail. In certain markets like parts of Arizona, Nevada, Pilot, in partnership with Union Pacific, has actually developed ethanol unloading facilities, and we serve majority of these markets. Cutting Pilot's ability to ship ethanol from its plant in Nebraska to these markets by 50% will substantially reduce the amount of gasoline available in these markets because we can't blend the ethanol into the gasoline, and would result in a further increase in prices during times when gasoline prices are up 48% since April 2021. To summarize, we believe UP's allocation logic is flawed, it's disproportionate, and unprecedented. If implemented, it'll have three impacts. There'll be a significant impact on DEF supply, potentially stranding a large number of trucks, a negative impact on diesel and gasoline supply and prices in an already challenged market, and it'll hurt our supply chain during times that we cannot afford it. On behalf of Pilot, our 70,000 trucking fleet customers, and the 1 million customers that we serve in our stores every day to keep America moving, I want to thank you for this opportunity to testify here today, to describe the situation and highlight the potential consequences of the country if this is left unresolved. As mentioned at the beginning, we want to be part of the solution, but the current situation is untenable for us. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Do you have that are served by UP?
I don't have the precise number of locations, but what happens is the UP brings in I'll talk about DEF into 40 locations in the US, and then we distribute it on trucks. So we've got 23 facilities and 17 to 18 transloaders. So once we create the DEF, we put it on a truck and take it out to our retail locations. But wholesale, it would be about 40 or 41.
41 places that UP delivers to you?
Doesn't deliver to all of them, but about 70% of it gets delivered by UP. And one of our challenges is DEF is made out of urea. So, it's tied to the fertilizer industry. And UP actually is single serve to a lot of urea manufacturing facilities. So even if I wanted to get somebody else to get the DEF, we couldn't.
Next question, are there any places where a switching order or there is some alternative could get you what you needed during this time?
Right now, UP is responsible for over 40 or 45% of our DEF supply. So if they had trackage rights, we've obviously gone and tried to talk to some other railroads saying like, hey, can you help us out? But most of them are unable to because of the constraints they have on their system, and they don't have trackage rights.
What was the message that UP sent? Tell us how they explained it to you.
The way they explained it to us was they basically, and let me get the exact numbers. So they basically sent us a note saying that in the last week, you shipped about 190 cars for the week, and we want you to reduce it by 46 cars, basically about 6 cars a day. And otherwise, we're going to embargo you. They gave us a week to do it. They have not embargoed us yet, and we haven't reduced the cars because we would be in deep trouble if we reduce the cars. We have reached out back to the UP a number of times asking for either a meeting with their senior leadership so that we can explain the consequences to them. We've had our outside counsel reach out to UP's outside counsel, but really have not had any engagement back from UP at this point.
I thought you related it to they were saying the people who've shipped a lot, those are the ones we're cutting. Is that the way you understood it?
Yes. So they according to their metric, they feel like we've increased our shipments from January to March. What's actually happened is we've just taken over as shipper on a number of the cars. The total number of cars has not really changed. So, but if you look at it with Pilot as the shipper, we have increased by about 60 cars a month. But in reality, those cars were coming to our locations anyways.
I'm still trying to figure out a business model where a company says, please don't buy our product. I'm sure somebody will explain that one to me before the day is out. I meant to say earlier, by the way, that Robert Primus, of course, is still with us. So why don't I ask Robert if he has any questions, and then we'll see if there are any up here, and then we'll go forward. So, but thank you very much.
Good morning, Marty. So are we not doing the whole panel? Are we just doing just this individual?
going to do this witness because he has to get out of here, Mr. Konar.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Konar, thank you very much for agreeing to actually come before the panel and talk about this. Can you talk about sort of the downstream effect if this embargo were to take place on the industry? Like how would it affect the price going forward?
So I'd break that up in two pieces. One is if the embargo were to take place and we were not able to move DEF on the UP, we would probably at this point lose about 35% to 40% of our DEF supply where we do not have alternatives. And, from an annual perspective, that would mean we would miss about 100 million gallons of DEF. And, you multiply that by, like I said, each rail car is worth about 5 million miles of trucking. If you lose 100 million gallons of DEF, it would be absolutely catastrophic because we don't just supply ourselves, we supply a lot of the market because we supply 30% of DEF in the United States. So I mean, the consequences there, I mean, not only would I get fired, but there'd be a lot more to it. But
you should be held holding the bag. I mean, obviously, it's not your fault in terms of you're cutting it back. I mean, my question I was trying to get to is, so if you've got to cut back 35 to 40% of DEF, you say that the trucks after 2010, all of them require it. What does that go to the cost of in terms of purchasing that? I mean, where's the price now? Where if that doomsday were to happen,
actually you just couldn't get it. Why, Sharon? You just could not get the DEF because there isn't the US numbers. The US consumes about 1 billion gallons of DEF. We supply more than 300 million, somewhere between 300 and 350 million. You could not replace 100 million gallons of DEF in any kind of reasonable time frame. You could maybe replace it by next year.
So what happens economically? I mean,
it's an absolute disaster. I mean, trucking is already so tight, and we're having so many issues with freight, right? So it would be, the simple way for me to say is it would be equivalent to removing 10% of the trucks from the road today.
Okay, thank you.
Question.
For those of us outside your industry, could you just explain what DEF is and why it's important?
Ma'am, I should have started with that. DEF is diesel emissions fluid. It's a urea derivative which reduces NOx emissions coming out of the tailpipe of trucks. And with all the CAFE standards and the clean air standards over time, NOx emissions have been reduced pretty substantially. And since 2010, there's a rule basically that you cannot make trucks that don't use DEF because you have to have the NOx emissions reduced. So all 2010 plus vintage trucks, and there aren't that many that go too far back because, a long distance truck is doing 250,000 miles a year or so. You don't survive longer than that. Pretty much all the trucks right now have to have DEF, and you actually can't turn the engine on if your DEF tank's empty. So it's not a choice.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Marty.
Very helpful. Robert, do you have something else? Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Just a follow-up question, if you don't mind. You were talking about your production now. Have you changed at all, in terms of your production? Why are you sort of threatening this embargo? I mean, with all the cars, are you adding cars because of what reason? Are you coming? Is it because of greater production? You said that production's been steady. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We're actually not adding cars. So what has happened is we've actually become the shipper of record on a number of cars that we were not before. So we still got the same number of cars going, but we've taken control, becoming the shipper because we needed to have some more flexibility with the rail issues we've been having as to where to, kind of where to move the cars and how to move the cars. So, and this has happened both in DEF and our ethanol
I think I've lost you. I can't hear you.
One second, we're working on it.
Okay. I can't hear anybody. I don't know if anybody can hear me.
We'll be right with you, Robert. We're working on it now.
Guys, thanks for watching this video, and remember, I'll see you on the next one.